My husband tricked me into marriage just to steal everything, but in court, he didn't expect I was. The scent of burnt toast fills the kitchen. The coffee maker sputters behind me, half working like everything else in this house. I stare out the window, watching the neighbor's golden retriever wag its tail as it chases leaves down the street. It's an ordinary day, sunlight pouring in, birds chirping, but something inside me feels brittle, unsteady. My name is Elena. I'm 38 years old and I live in Asheville, North Carolina, a quiet town tucked into the Blue Ridge Mountains where everything is supposed to be peaceful, safe. But right now, I don't feel safe at all. I don't feel anything, just numb. I can hear my husband Drew pacing upstairs. His footsteps are light. He always moves like he's hiding something. Last night I asked him about a charge on our credit card. He laughed, said I was imagining things. This morning he kissed my cheek and said he loved me. His lips were cold. The thing is, I used to believe him. We met 3 years ago. I was at a community art gala helping raise funds for a children's mural downtown. He showed up wearing a navy suit and a crooked smile. Said he liked my earrings, asked me what kind of paint I used, listened when I spoke. After a few dates, I was hooked. He was kind, gentle, a little mysterious, just enough to make me lean in closer. By month 6, he proposed in front of my mom and brother on Christmas Eve. He got down on one knee and promised to protect me, to never let me feel alone again. My mom cried. My brother clapped him on the back and whispered, "You found a good one." I thought so too. We married in a garden behind a bed and breakfast, the kind with twinkle lights and pastel hydrangeas. He held my hands during the vows, squeezed them when I started crying. Forever, he said. Always. But forever started unraveling the moment the honeymoon ended. Subtly, like a thread I didn't notice until the whole fabric of my life was slowly coming apart. At first it was small things. He said he'd handle the taxes, the insurance, the bills. "You're always so stressed," he said. "Let me take care of it." I thought that was love. I thought that was partnership. I signed where he pointed, smiled when he said, "Trust me." Then there were the business trips. 2 nights here, 3 days there. He never answered calls after 9 p.m. When I asked who he was traveling with, he'd say, "You don't need to know everything, Elena." I started waking up at 3 a.m. for no reason. I'd walk around the house barefoot, the floors cold under my feet, staring at the photos on the wall, our wedding day, that beach trip to Corolla, the brunch where he kissed my forehead and told me I was the best thing that ever happened to him. If that were true, why did it feel like I was disappearing? There's something strange that happens when you stop being seen in your own marriage. It's like screaming underwater. You make all the noise in the world, but it never breaks the surface. I tried talking to my friends. They said, maybe he's just tired from work. I asked my mom once softly whether she thought Drew seemed different. She hesitated, then changed the subject. No one wanted to see the cracks but me. So I stopped asking. I stopped talking. I became a woman I didn't recognize, tiptoeing through her own home, asking permission for things she once owned outright. Until today. Today, I found a letter, stuffed in the back of the desk drawer where he keeps receipts and expired coupons. A letter from a financial advisor addressed to Drew. It listed assets, my assets, the house, the land I inherited from my father, the joint account, my trust, every penny I brought into this marriage, and next to each one was a check mark, labeled transfer complete. My heart didn't race. It stopped. I sat on the floor with the letter clutched in my hand, knees pulled to my chest. The silence of the house felt louder than any scream I could have made. I think about the wedding, about the vows, about the way he looked at me like I was his everything. I think about how he held my hand as I signed document after document. The home refinance, the estate planning update, the shared checking account he opened for emergencies. And I realize he never wanted me. He wanted what I owned. The ring on my finger feels like ice. I slide it off. It doesn't make a sound when it hits the wood floor, but to me, it's an earthquake. What do you do when you find out your marriage was never real? When the person you gave everything to, your name, your trust, your future, was planning to gut you from the start? I stand up slowly, the letter still in my hand. I don't cry. I don't scream. But I do make a promise. He took everything. Now I will take it all back. I don't remember walking back upstairs. I just remember the feeling in my chest like someone had poured cement around my heart, heavy, hard, immovable. Drew was in the bedroom slipping cufflinks into his sleeves. He looked up, smiled like nothing had changed. "Big client today," he said. "Wish me luck." I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just watched him. Really watched him. He was always handsome in a clinical way, like a man who'd been designed to impress mothers and financial advisors. His hair, neat tie, sharp cologne, expensive. A man who had curated every inch of himself. For a while, I thought he did it for me. Now I knew he did it for the performance. "Hey," he said again, tilting his head. "Everything okay?" I managed a nod. That was my first act of survival, playing dumb. I walked over, kissed him on the cheek. "Good luck," I said, just like always. He smiled, pleased, and then he left, just like always. As the front door shut behind him, I turned and stared at our wedding photo on the dresser. I picked it up, stared at my own smiling face. I didn't recognize her. That woman was in love. That woman thought she was safe. And I hated what I had to admit next. That woman had no idea what she was doing. I spent the rest of the day doing what I should have done a year ago. I started with the lawyer I had used after my father's estate passed to me, Mr. Fisher, a kind-eyed man with white hair and a voice that always sounded like he was reading a bedtime story. He took my call right away. "Elena," he said warmly, "I've been meaning to check in. Everything all right?" "No," I said, swallowing hard. "I think my husband's been stealing from me." A pause. "Then come in tomorrow, first thing, and bring every document you can." It was the first time in weeks someone had believed me. I dug through drawers, pulled out dusty file boxes. My hands trembled as I laid out the pieces. Marriage license, property deeds, bank statements, old emails. The documents I signed without reading. The ones Drew handled. And as I worked, I remembered. I remembered the time I asked for money to repaint the guest room and Drew told me we should hold off for now. I remembered the charity check I wrote that bounced. I remembered the call from the credit card company asking if I'd authorized a withdrawal I never made. All the signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. Love does that to you. It tells you to close your eyes. But now I was keeping mine wide open. When Drew came home that night, I was in the kitchen cooking his favorite pasta. Just like always. He kissed the back of my neck. "Smells amazing. You're the best, you know that." I smiled, turning the sauce with a wooden spoon. "Anything for you." He didn't know I'd spent the day unearthing every lie he ever buried. He didn't know that I now had evidence of financial abuse, forged signatures, and even one shady land transfer that could land him in real trouble. He didn't know that I'd frozen the joint account that morning. He didn't know that I was done being the fool. But I needed more time, so I played the role sweet, naive Elena, the one he chose because he thought she was soft, breakable. "Want to watch something later?" I asked as we sat down to eat. He nodded, swirling his wine. Maybe that documentary about trust funds. Of course he wanted that one. I watched him eat, watched his smug, satisfied face as he stabbed another bite of penny. He thought he'd won. But this story wasn't over. And he didn't know who he was really married to. Later that night, I stood in the shower water, scorching my skin. I pressed my hands to the tiles and whispered out loud, "You will not break." I thought about everything I gave him, my body, my loyalty, my last name, and how he gave me lies in return. I thought about how I used to believe that marriage meant protection. But what if marriage to him just meant opportunity? I went to bed beside a man who had stolen everything, and I fell asleep already plotting how I'd take it back. If you were in my shoes, would you keep pretending? Would you smile across the table from the person who robbed you blind? Or would you gather the storm quietly, letting them believe they're still safe? Because I knew this much already, the calmest women are often the most dangerous. And I was done being calm. The next morning, I woke up before Drew. His arm was draped across my waist like a claim. I slipped out from under it and moved quietly into the bathroom, shutting the door without a sound. I didn't look in the mirror. I didn't want to see what betrayal looked like on my face. Instead, I opened my laptop, sat on the closed toilet lid, and started a new document titled Evidence. Line by line, I typed everything I knew. The date he asked me to sign over the deed, the day the joint account mysteriously halved, the emails, the voicemails, the bank transactions, The way his voice changed whenever I asked about our finances. I wasn't just journaling, I was building a case. That afternoon, I met with Mr. Fisher. He took one look at me and said, "You're different today." I nodded. I woke up. He reviewed the files I'd brought, lips tightening as he flipped through page after page. "This is extensive." He was careful, but not careful enough. "Is it enough to prove intent?" I asked. He looked at me. "Elena, if we do this, it's not just about divorce. We're talking civil court, fraud, financial abuse, possibly criminal charges." I folded my hands tightly in my lap. He took everything. If I don't fight, I'm left with nothing but regret. Mr. Fisher gave a small, grim smile. "Then we'll fight." Back home, I baked banana bread. That's how you know a woman is planning something she bakes. Not out of love, but out of control. It gave my hands something to do while my brain unraveled every step of the life I'd built with Drew. He walked in just as I was pulling it from the oven. "You're spoiling me?" He grinned, coming up behind me to kiss my cheek. I smiled sweetly. "You deserve it." That was the lie he liked best. He poured himself a drink, and I watched him from the corner of my eye. No remorse. No guilt. Just entitlement. That's what chilled me most, how comfortable he was in the role of thief. He believed I was still the woman who wouldn't fight back. The days that followed were a masterclass in performance. Every morning I kissed him goodbye. Every evening I smiled over dinner. And every night I dug deeper, finding forged notary stamps, uncovering secret accounts, even stumbling on an email chain with his financial planner, discussing how to protect Drew's assets in the event of Elena's emotional instability. Emotional instability. That was rich coming from the man who built a relationship on lies. Then came the breaking point. I received a letter, certified, from the county assessor's office. It stated that the property I'd inherited from my father, 40 acres of untouched mountain land, was no longer in my name. It had been transferred 6 months ago. By me. Only I never signed that paper. I drove to the office in person, asked to see the transfer deed, and there it was. My signature. Except it wasn't mine. Not even close. My breath left my body like a punch to the chest. My hands were shaking as I held the document. The clerk, a woman with kind eyes, leaned in and whispered, "You're not the first wife I've seen cry over this kind of thing." I didn't cry. I took a picture. And I said thank you. When I returned home that evening, Drew was in the den watching sports. He asked if I'd remembered to pick up more of that wine he liked. I smiled. It slipped my mind. Well, he shrugged. "I guess I'll go get it tomorrow." "Sure," I said, my voice soft. "Do whatever you want." And I meant it. Do whatever you want for now. Because everything he had taken from me, my name, my worth, my land, I was about to take back with interest. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of him anymore. But let me tell you something about revenge. It doesn't come all at once. It has to be planned like a slow-brewed tea. Hot, steeped, measured, and just bitter enough to satisfy. If you found out the person you trusted most had orchestrated your ruin, would you shout it from the rooftops? Or would you let them enjoy the illusion of control, just long enough for you to pull the rug out from under them? Because I wasn't going to ruin him with anger. I was going to ruin him with silence. By week's end, I had everything I needed. A copy of the forged deed, a timeline of financial withdrawals, screenshots of emails, statements from joint accounts where my deposits had vanished and his transactions had exploded. I even found a secret storage unit he'd rented under a fake LLC, probably where he kept whatever else he was hiding. But the most important thing I had, a story. One that a judge would understand. One that didn't just say he stole from me, but he married me to do it. I remember sitting in Mr. Fisher's office with a folder in my lap, my palms sweaty and my throat dry. The folder held my entire life in paper, the marriage license, the stolen deeds, the account closures, the falsified documents, all of it. Mr. Fisher flipped through it slowly, his brows knitting together. He knew exactly what he was doing, he said. He planned this. I looked out the window at the mountains. They were soft blue in the distance, dusted with snow at the peaks. "I think he chose me because I was too kind," I said. Too trusting. "Don't confuse kindness with weakness," he said. "What you're doing now takes strength most people don't have." I swallowed. "Will it hold up in court?" Mr. Fisher nodded, his voice solid. "Yes. But Elena, once we start this, it's war." I didn't hesitate. Good. He already fired the first shot. Back home, I made sure everything looked normal. Drew was humming in the shower, his voice carefree. I stood in the closet staring at his suits. He wore power like cologne, chose confidence like cufflinks. But I knew better now. Underneath all that polish was rot. At dinner, he mentioned taking a trip. Just a weekend thing, he said. Golf with a few clients. Sounds nice, I replied. You work so hard. He smiled like a king receiving praise. I really do, don't I? I cut into my chicken and thought, you're going to lose everything you ever stole from me, and you won't even see it coming. The next morning, I served him coffee and a smile. While he was busy planning his getaway, I filed the lawsuit. Fraud, forgery, intentional misrepresentation, marital asset misappropriation. The works! I remember standing at the courthouse, the paper trembling in my hand as I submitted it. It felt like pressing a detonation button. Not out of vengeance. Out of necessity. Because what he did wasn't just about money. It was about erasing me. And I was here to make sure I didn't disappear. 2 days later, he got served. It happened while he was stepping out of his car in the driveway. A man in a gray suit handed him the envelope. Drew laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. Then he opened it. I was watching from the upstairs window. And when I saw his expression change, when the smirk dropped, when the confusion crept in, when his jaw clenched, I smiled for the first time in weeks. He came inside in a rage, slammed the door, threw the envelope on the kitchen table. What the hell is this? I sat calmly. You should read it. You're suing me, his voice cracked. You can't be serious. I didn't blink. I'm very serious. You're overreacting. I slid the copy of the forged deed across the table. This says otherwise. He paled. Where did you get that? You left it in your desk, right next to the wine coupons. He sat down stunned. You went through my stuff. You went through my life, Drew. Every account, every document, every lie. I just finally opened my eyes. He stood up, pacing. You won't win. The house is in my name. The land's gone. The money's gone. Maybe I said softly, but I kept records, and now the courts will see what you did, and they don't like thieves in tailored suits. The next week was a blur. Lawyers, depositions, financial reviews, statements. I never knew how much noise silence could cause until I sat across from Drew in that conference room, my lawyer laying out every detail while he tried to play dumb. But the dumb act didn't work anymore, because I was done being silent. And the judge, he was listening. Tell me, if someone built an entire marriage to rob you, would you fight? Would you burn down every illusion they built? Because I wasn't just coming for justice. I was coming for the version of me that used to be afraid. The day we stepped into court, I wore the navy blue dress my mother gave me before she passed. It was plain but dignified, the kind of dress that said, I know who I am now. Drew, on the other hand, walked in like he owned the place. Charcoal suit, slicked hair, that same rehearsed smirk he used at parties and real estate pitches. He looked confident, polished. But when he turned and saw me already seated at the plaintiff's table, file in hand, calm and silent, something in his face shifted. Just a flicker. Barely a blink. Fear. The courtroom wasn't crowded. Just to the judge, a few observers are attorneys. But to me, it felt like every woman who'd ever been lied to was sitting on my shoulder, whispering, "Hold the line." The proceedings began. Mr. Fisher stood and walked the court through my evidence. A timeline of financial transfers and account closures. Emails and texts from Drew detailing how to isolate marital assets. A forensic accountant's statement tracing my inheritance to shell accounts Drew controlled. And finally, the smoking gun, the forged deed to my father's land, complete with a falsified notary stamp and a signature that barely resembled my own. Drew shifted in his seat. His attorney objected, of course. Said I had agreed to everything. Claimed I was emotionally unstable and seeking revenge. Even suggested that I was trying to punish a good man for taking initiative in the marriage. I didn't react, not once. Because the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand still long enough to be seen. Then it was my turn to speak. The judge asked me to approach. I stood knees steady, walked forward, cleared my throat, and for the first time told the whole story. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't cry. I simply spoke about how I had trusted a man who watched me fall in love while he was already calculating how to gut me financially, how he used affection as a smokescreen, how he married me not to build a life, but to dismantle mine. I ended with a single sentence. He didn't just steal my money. He stole who I used to be. The room was silent when I sat down. Even Drew was quiet. The judge recessed for 2 hours. I waited in a side room with Mr. Fisher, who offered me tea. My hands were trembling slightly, but not from fear. From release. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of losing anything because I had already lost it. What mattered now wasn't revenge. It was recognition. It was truth. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge didn't waste time. He ruled in my favor. All assets stolen through fraud were to be restored. The forged deed was nullified, and my land returned to my name. Drew was to pay restitution for the amount siphoned from my inheritance. But it was the judge's final words that stayed with me. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a betrayal disguised as a marriage. Drew didn't look at me as he left the courtroom. His hands were shaking, his collar open, no more smirk. The man who once controlled everything now looked like a shadow of himself. And I stood tall, file in hand, dress crisp, soul intact. Because when someone marries you, just to break you, just to bleed, you dry, the greatest revenge isn't fire, it's survival. Tell me, have you ever stared down someone who stole your life and realized they can't touch you anymore? That kind of freedom isn't loud. It's quiet and absolute. After the verdict, I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove past our old neighborhood, past the grocery store where Drew used to charm the cashiers, past the coffee shop where we used to sit on Sundays and talk about our future. I parked in front of the small house I'd lived in before the marriage, just a one-bedroom with peeling paint and a creaky porch. It had been rented out for years. But it was mine, still in my name, still waiting for me. I stepped out of the car and just stood there for a moment, hand on the railing, feeling the wind against my skin. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, but somehow it also felt like peace. I didn't go in, not yet. I just needed to feel something that belonged to me again. The next morning, the media got hold of the court ruling. Local woman wins, fraud case against husband who stole her inheritance. Real estate investor, accused of marriage for money scheme, loses big in court. Drew hated bad press. He called me 3 times. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. Elena, this is crazy. We can still fix this. You made your point. Don't ruin everything. You were never this cruel before. I stared at those messages for a long time, and then I deleted them. Cruel. No, what I did wasn't cruelty. What he did marrying me to gut me financially, manipulating my trust, forging my signature, that was cruelty. What I did was self-defense. A few days later, I received a letter from his attorney requesting a settlement offer to avoid further complications. I wrote back through mine. No. There would be no more compromises, no quiet deals, no second chances. He chose the path of betrayal. I just chose to walk away stronger. It wasn't about the money anymore, or the house, or the land. It was about remembering who I used to be before I was deceived. The woman who painted her front porch on a Saturday morning with music blasting from the radio. The woman who bought herself flowers just because. The woman who loved deeply, but now wisely. I took long walks, made soup from scratch, started a part-time job at the art center downtown where we first met. They gave me a small office and a warm welcome. For the first time in years, I didn't have to explain myself to anyone. I just showed up as I was. I even repainted that one-bedroom house yellow this time, bright and defiant. I planted mums by the porch and hung a new wind chime. Not everything was healed, not yet, but it was growing back, quietly, day by day. One afternoon, while sorting through old papers, I found our wedding album, tucked in a drawer I hadn't opened in months. I sat down on the floor and opened it. There we were, smiling, dancing, holding hands. I looked at the woman in the white dress, eyes glowing with trust. I didn't hate her. She wasn't stupid. She was brave, brave enough to love without holding back. And now, she was brave enough to let go. People ask me sometimes, would you ever get married again? I laugh, not because I'm bitter, but because the question feels so far away from the life I'm building now. I don't need a husband to feel whole. I just need honesty, quiet mornings, and my name on every piece of paper I sign. If someone you loved deeply turned out to be a thief in disguise, what would you do? Would you walk away broken? Or would you fight like hell to take back everything they tried to erase? Because I didn't just win in court. I won myself back. And that was the only justice I ever needed. The strange thing about rebuilding is how ordinary it feels. You expect fireworks or music swelling in the background, but real healing is quiet, uncinematic. It's standing in your kitchen and realizing you've been smiling for a full minute without noticing. It's sleeping through the night without jolting awake from dreams about bank statements or betrayal. It's finding peace in laundry and podcasts and the sound of your own thoughts again. That's where I was. A month after the final court ruling, I found myself in the county clerk's office, this time not in panic or grief, but with a firm voice and a list of documents to file. Title transfers, bank account updates, my new will, my real will, one where no one could ever take from me again. I also started seeing a therapist, something I never imagined I'd do. Her name was Paula. She had a soft laugh and wore colorful scarves, and she didn't flinch when I told her the worst of it. She said something that stuck with me. "Elena, he didn't fall out of love. He fell out of character. And it was never a character meant to last." That made me cry more than anything else, because deep down I knew it was true. I had been mourning a man who never existed. Drew's life, on the other hand, began to crumble. He lost his investment license. His reputation tanked. Some of the women he'd been grooming for his next business partnership went public. Others came to me privately asking, "Did he do the same thing to you?" And while part of me wanted to say yes, and here's how you destroy him, I chose instead to say, here's how you survive him. Because that's the part no one teaches us. Not how to punish, but how to recover. I was at the park one morning, sitting on a bench with a sketch pad in my lap, drawing a crooked oak tree when a woman sat beside me. We nodded politely. She looked to be in her early 50s, soft-lined face, delicate hands. After a moment, she said, "You look like you've been through something." I glanced at her, half smiling. "Is it that obvious?" "No," she said. "It's just, you sit like someone who's had to rebuild." That made me pause. Because yes, I had, but I hadn't realized it was visible, that maybe the healing was showing on the outside now too. There was a time I thought I'd never trust again. But trust doesn't have to mean handing over your heart wrapped in silk. It can mean trusting yourself to walk away, to ask better questions, to hold your boundaries like gates, not open fields. I still have moments, those late-night echoes, when I wonder, was it my fault? Was I too naive, too soft, too eager to believe in love? But then I remind myself being open-hearted is not a crime. What he did to that heart was, tell me, if someone stole your faith in love and security in yourself, could you ever reclaim it? Could you stand in front of the mirror a year later and say, "She's back"? Because I did, not all at once, but piece by piece. And now, I love my little yellow house. I love my quiet porch and my Sunday mornings and my full name on every title, every account, every choice I make. I am Elena, not someone's wife, not someone's plan, just me. And that's more than enough. Spring arrived quietly. No dramatic burst, just a slow, warm breath that softened the earth and made the wind feel less like a warning. One Saturday morning, I opened the windows for the first time since the storm of my marriage passed. The breeze carried in the scent of daffodils from the yard. I stood in the doorway of my kitchen and let the sunlight wash over me. It was the first time I felt it deep in my bones. Freedom. Not the loud kind, not the movie scene version with champagne or screaming. Just the kind that exists when no one is watching. The kind that feels like safety in your own skin. I made pancakes that morning just for myself, played Ella Fitzgerald on the little Bluetooth speaker by the fridge. And when I sat down at my small kitchen table, the one I'd picked out without anyone's opinion or interference, I smiled. Because I was enough company for my own breakfast. I got a card in the mail that week, no return address. Inside was a short message written in clean, deliberate handwriting. "You think you won, but I'll rise again." I didn't have to wonder who sent it. I didn't feel fear. I felt pity. Because that's the difference now. He still lives in a world of power games and fragile pride. While I've stepped into something far more dangerous to men like him, peace. I didn't report the note. I didn't retaliate. I simply tore it up piece by piece and let the scraps fall into the recycling bin like dust. And then I went on with my day, because I'd already won the only war that mattered, the one inside myself. I spent more time at the community center, helped young girls with their art portfolios, gave quiet advice to women going through silent battles of their own. There's a language we speak, those of us who've been manipulated, gutted, and discarded like we were nothing. We say things like, I'm fine, but what we really mean is I'm learning how to stand. I told them the truth carefully. Not all of it, but enough to let them know you're not alone. One afternoon, I sat by the lake behind the center, sketchpad in my lap again. There were dragonflies skating across the surface of the water and laughter from a birthday party somewhere nearby. I wasn't drawing anything in particular, just movement, just light, and I realized something I hadn't let myself admit until then. I was happy. Not because someone loved me, not because someone chose me, but because I had chosen myself, and that choice was final. If someone told you your heartbreak would become the foundation of your power, would you believe them? If someone said the worst day of your life would eventually be the day you stopped living for anyone else, would you believe that too? Because now I do. And every morning that I open my eyes and stretch out in the quiet of a home I reclaimed with both hands, I whisper it like a prayer. Never again, not just to betrayal, but to smallness, to silence, to disappearing. I am here. I am whole. And I remember everything. I didn't expect to see him again. Months passed. Seasons changed. The trees outside my little yellow house had gone from green to gold to bare, and I had stopped counting days since the courtroom. But one morning in October, I walked into the local grocery store, and there he was, Drew, at the end of aisle 3. He was reaching for a box of cereal, his posture different somehow, smaller, slumped. He turned, probably sensing me there, and for a breath we just stared at each other. No words, no sounds, just the eerie silence between two people who once promised each other forever. He opened his mouth. Elena. I raised a hand, not angry, not trembling, just done. I'm not yours anymore, I said quietly. And you were never mine. That's all. I turned, left my cart behind, walked out into the morning sun like it was waiting just for me. And maybe it was. That night I lit a candle in the kitchen window. Not for him, for her. The woman I used to be. The one who wanted to believe, who tried too hard, who folded herself into smaller shapes just to fit someone else's idea of love. I whispered to her, you didn't fail. You were just too pure for someone so calculated. And I swear I felt her finally exhale inside me. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant remembering with softness. It meant telling the truth without bitterness. It meant building a life that no longer included the man who once thought he could buy me, use me, erase me. A month later, I got an invitation to speak at a local women's retreat. They'd read the news articles. They'd heard what happened. They wanted me to talk about recovery, about resilience. I hesitated at first. I'm not the kind of woman who likes microphones or spotlights. I've never been loud. But then I thought maybe that's exactly why I should speak. Because the women like me, the quiet ones, the trusting ones, the kind ones, were always told we're not strong enough. But look at what I walked through. And look where I am now. The room was full that night, folding chairs, fairy lights, warm tea, and paper cups. I stood at the front, heart racing, and said just one thing to begin. I married a man who chose me because he thought I was easy to control. He saw my softness and mistook it for stupidity. But what he didn't see, what most people don't, is that women like us aren't weak. We're just patient, until we're not. There were tears. There were nods. There was a silence afterward that felt like recognition. Afterward, one woman approached me, mid-40s, hands stuffed into the pockets of a worn sweater. She said I left him last week, after 17 years. Your story. It helped me realize I'm not crazy. I took her hand. You're not. You're finally awake. I walked home that night beneath a sky full of stars' cool air pressing gently against my skin. I didn't feel hollow anymore. I didn't feel angry. I just felt real. And in a world that tried so hard to make me feel small, invisible, unworthy, that was the greatest revenge of all. Autumn deepened. The mornings were crisp, the air edged with that delicate scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Life no longer felt like a performance I had to survive. It felt like mine again, quiet, simple, entirely unremarkable to the outside world. And I loved it. I kept a journal now. Not the kind filled with grief or plans for revenge, but one that captured the stillness of my new life. I wrote about the neighbor's dog learning to chase its tail, about the buttercups blooming longer than usual, about the way I was learning to sleep with the windows cracked open again, unafraid of what the night might bring. One morning I was sipping tea in the kitchen when the mail came. A heavy envelope sat on top of the pile. Thick paper, legal seal. My name embossed. I opened it slowly. Final confirmation of restitution. The last of the money Drew had been ordered to repay had finally arrived wired to my private account, along with an apology letter from his legal team, likely templated and hollow. I smiled, but not because I cared about the money. It was the punctuation mark at the end of a sentence I had written myself. He had taken everything, and now he had to give it all back. I didn't tell anyone about it, not right away, not even Mr. Fisher. I walked it down to the bank in person, deposited it with a nod, and spent the rest of the afternoon repainting the porch railings. The money would stay where it belonged. Safe. Guarded. Mine. But the real wealth was how untouchable I had become. Some nights I still think about the early days when love felt like a curtain drawn wide when I was too eager to please, too willing to say yes before I asked why. I think about how easily Drew had studied me, targeted me, walked me down the aisle like a lamb. But I don't cry for her anymore. I thank her. She survived the worst of it. She held on long enough to hand me the torch. And now I'm carrying us both. There was one last thing I needed to do. I found the journal I had started in the thick of the unraveling, the one I filled with timelines and evidence quotes from Drew, all the little details I feared I'd forget. Page after page of pain, humiliation, fear. I carried it to the backyard fire pit one night, lit a match, and watched it burn. Not to erase it, but to release it, because the woman I am now doesn't need a record of her grief to remember how strong she became. So, if you're reading this, if you're in the middle of your own unraveling, wondering if you'll ever breathe freely again, listen to me. You will. It won't be fast. It won't be clean. It won't look like victory at first. But healing is never flashy. It's not revenge that saves you. It's returning to yourself. If someone stripped you of everything you had, your security, your identity, your sense of safety, would you fight? Would you gather yourself from the ashes one breath at a time? Because I did. And now the life I've built is quiet and slow and entirely mine. And that, my friend, is the kind of ending they never see coming. The final snowfall of the year arrived like a whispered apology, soft, slow, unexpected. I watched it through the kitchen window, a steaming mug between my palms. No TV, no noise, just the hush of white covering the earth like a clean slate. It felt fitting. Everything in my life had been stripped bare and rebuilt. The ashes of the old version of me, the trusting, quiet, easily silenced woman, had long since blown away. What stood in her place wasn't hard or bitter, just whole. I still walk past couples sometimes laughing hand in hand, and for a moment I remember what it felt like to believe, to look at someone and think this is forever. But then I remember something even better. I look in the mirror now and think this is forever. Me. Not a version of myself shaped to fit someone else's story. Not a woman edited down to please. Not a wife used as a means to an end. Just Elena, living in a yellow house she saved, wearing her own last name like armor. I don't need grand statements to feel proud of how far I've come. I don't need anyone to tell me I did the right thing. But sometimes when the wind is still and the house is quiet, I let myself whisper it. You made it, and you never lost yourself. Not really. Because the truth is I was never broken. Just buried, and now I've unearthed something stronger than I ever imagined. So if you're sitting in the dark, afraid to admit how badly someone hurt you, afraid that speaking up will make you look foolish, dramatic, unstable, please hear me when I say, you are not the villain in your own rescue. You are the storm that followed silence, the soft thunder in your own chest, the light that returned even after the blackout. The snow kept falling that night, blanketing the steps I had taken and the paths I had yet to walk. It didn't ask me for anything, didn't demand I be strong or prepared. It just arrived, and so did I. Without apology, without shame, without the weight of his name dragging behind me like a chain. And so here we are, the end of the road, or maybe the beginning of something far better. Looking back now, it's almost strange how quiet the shift was. There was no loud crack, no dramatic escape. Just a woman standing in her kitchen realizing that everything she thought was love was something else entirely. And instead of collapsing, she rose. Softly, deliberately, completely. Some people think betrayal leaves you jaded, hardened, unable to trust again. But I think betrayal, real betrayal, does something more profound. It opens your eyes. It teaches you that your softness was never the mistake. Your kindness was never the weakness. Your trust wasn't the failure. Their deceit was. You loved with an open heart and they saw it as an opportunity. But what they failed to see, what they never imagined, was that beneath your open heart was a steel spine. Now I live without explanation. I buy my own flowers. I answer to no one. I sleep with the windows open and the doors locked, not out of fear, but because I can finally afford peace. No more asking permission. No more second guessing. No more handing over pieces of myself just to keep the peace. People still ask me, "Don't you wish it had all gone differently?" Sometimes. But then I remember, if it hadn't happened the way it did, I might still be married to a man who only ever saw me as a transaction. I might still be shrinking to keep someone else comfortable. And worst of all, I might never have learned the most powerful truth of all. I am not breakable, I am rebuildable. To anyone who's still stuck in the silence, you are not alone. You are not crazy. And you are not finished. Speak, stand, survive. And when the time comes, reclaim everything. So now I sit by the window in my yellow house, watching the morning light spill across the floor, and I ask myself quietly, if you were me, what would you do? Would you let him keep your story? Or would you write your own ending page by page, word by word, until justice tastes like freedom, and healing sounds like your own name spoken aloud? Because I did, and I'd do it all again.